what everyone in the world should worry about is if there were a broader war between Israel and Iran, particularly one that would bring the United States in. That's affecting everybody. That's oil prices well over 100, maybe 150. That's the Straits of Hormuz shut down. That's a global recession. I don't think that we are there, but it is clearly a bigger risk than it was a week ago.
Now, the Middle East is still, of course, the big story, and Israel's military is claiming it has killed the head of the Hamas government in Gaza. The IDF say he was eliminated alongside other senior security officials 3 months ago. 9 people were killed in Israeli airstrikes on Beirut last night, according to officials in Lebanon. Oliver Marsden is a journalist in Beirut covering the conflict for The Times.
It was a strike on a medical centre, actually, a kind of Hezbollah or Amal, another Shia party affiliated medical centre. Obviously, Hezbollah has, they do run schools, they run supermarkets, they have their own civil kind of defense in terms of like firefighters and paramedics. So yes, this appears to have been a strike on a medical center and apartment block.
That is Oliver Marsden in Beirut, working for The Times. Ian Bremmer is president and founder of Eurasia Group and G0 Media. Ian Bremmer, what do you make of what's happened in the last 7 days or so, and just how worried are you about what might happen over the next couple of days?
Well, it's significant escalation, clearly, and what everyone in the world should worry about is if there were a broader war between Israel and Iran, particularly one that would bring the United States in. That's affecting everybody. That's oil prices well over 100, maybe 150. That's the Straits of Hormuz shut down. That's a global recession. I don't think that we are there, but it is clearly a bigger risk than it was a week ago. The Iranians are extremely cautious about what they are doing in response to Israel's asymmetric military capabilities in the region, including against Iran's most powerful proxy, Hezbollah. But still, those 180 ballistic missiles that were sent against Israel just a couple of days ago, the Israelis and the Americans are planning to respond to that. And the nature of that response and what we then see from Iran is by far the most important geopolitical issue in the world in the coming week.
Now, there is a significant holiday, isn't there, in Israel over today and the next couple of days, I understand. So are you not expecting much to happen in the short term?
I'm not, and I'm also not because the Americans and Israelis are coordinating these responses. You would have seen from the White House just yesterday, there's a very strong response saying that the Iranian strikes against Israel were unacceptable, that there would be retaliation. You saw from Biden also directly saying that they would not accept strikes by Israel against Iran's nuclear capabilities directly, so trying to put a lid on containment. Now, you'll remember over the last year, every time Biden has warned the Israelis don't do something, whether it's allow the humanitarian aid in for Gaza residents or whether it's don't do a ground war in Rafah, he's been ignored by the Israeli government. But here, when it comes to striking Iran, the Israelis need the Americans. They need active military cooperation from the U.S. because it's far away and because the Iranian targets are hardened. Also because they'll want American defenses in response to anything that ends up hitting Israel, just as they've gotten in April, just as they've gotten in the last week. So the fact that there is active coordination between the U.S. and Israel here, unlike with the war in Lebanon, is not only slowing this down, but also makes me a little more hopeful that the nature of Israeli retaliation will be more contained.
And aren't we really just in a holding pattern until after the American presidential election?
Absolutely not. I don't think anyone could look at what's happened in Lebanon in the last week, whether it was about the attacks of the pagers and the walkie-talkies blowing up, or the ground war, or the assassination of Hezbollah. No one would refer to that as a holding pattern. No one in the Gulf would refer to that as a holding pattern. The urgent op-ed that you saw from the Saudi foreign minister, Prince Faisal, yesterday in the Financial Times, that's not a holding pattern. There is an awful lot going on here right now through the U.S. election, through a lame duck Biden period. It has not, I mean, it's not that the U.S. election doesn't matter,
No.
because Harris or Trump would have a different view of Israel, Palestine, and of the Middle East. But it is not slowing people down.
If Harris does win, would that mean that Antony Blinken stays in position, and what impact would that have?
And no, I think you'll see a complete turnover of the core national security and diplomatic positions. That includes Jake Sullivan as national security advisor. That includes Tony Blinken as Secretary of State. There would be different people put in. There'd be a lot of consistency in a transition between Biden and Harris, were Harris to win the election on November 5, but less so on Israel-Palestine. Here, I really do believe that Kamala Harris and her core advisors' views of rule of law, of following international norms, would mean more support to ensure that the Palestinians are able to survive and also have political and economic trajectory that has not been a particular priority, in my view, under the Biden administration. Israel would certainly still remain the most important ally of the United States in the Middle East, and the U.S. would still be a relative outlier compared to its allies and, of course, the rest of the world in that regard. But I do think we would see a change in policy.
Can I just ask you briefly about the economic impact? I mean, a lot of people, I can't be alone, in just not really understanding where Iran gets its resources from. How is it able to fund Hezbollah to the degree it does seem able to do so? And what about the impact on Israel when so many of its young people are being taken out of the workforce and put into the armed forces?
Well, I mean, you've seen that with Russia fighting a massive war, they're still growing at about 4% this year. It's natural resource wealth. It's a war economy. Iran has a fair amount of that, right? I mean, they are producing a lot of oil, a lot of gas, and they're still able to trade with countries that refuse to accept U.S., UK, and other allied sanctions. You've also seen that the Iranians have been a critical partner in the provision of drones to Russia, and even building drone factories on the ground in Russia. All of this means more money for the Iranians. And there had been some sanctions reduction. There had been the unfreezing of a large amount of Iranian state assets with the JCPOA, the Iranian nuclear deal, which the Americans pulled out unilaterally from. But nonetheless, that gave them a chance to build up their war coffers. There was a period of time with sanctions at their maximum that Hezbollah forces were diminished. And a lot of those fighters were saying, I'm not getting paid as a Hezbollah fighter, so I'm going to go be a baker or a bus driver or whatnot. Well, I mean, once the Iranians had more money, they were able to step up their support for the proxies in the axis of resistance.
And Israel's economy doesn't suffer with so many people having to fight, being conscripted.
Oh, it's absolutely suffering. I mean, they've taken a downgrade from the ratings agencies. The shekel has gotten hammered over the past months. There's not been the same inbound investment in Israel's extraordinary technology sector. But Israel's a very strong country. It's a very wealthy country. And although it's not polite to say this, I should mention that all of the use of Israel's technology and military capabilities against the Palestinians and against the Lebanese, I mean, the Gulf states are seeing that war in action and saying, wow, these guys are really effective. I'm going to want to buy a lot more of that. I'm going to want to partner with them. So long term, frankly, Israel's economic perspectives are pretty strong.
Very interesting to get your take. Thank you very much. That's Ian Bremmer, who's president and founder of Eurasia Group and G0 Media.